How much time should you train? And, if you want to prepare yourself for an extreme level of success on the national level. There's a book, right? It's called the 10,000 Hour Rule. I think that's the name of the book. And it says you need about 10,000 hours to become a master at anything. I'm not sure about that, but let's say it's 2,000 hours. Well, if you take 15 years to get that number of hours of training in, that's fine. But guess what? You're probably going to run out of time. If you try to get all that training crammed into 2 years, you're probably going to not be able to keep up. So that's the reason we're big fans of train once a week year round. And you go, my son's 5. He's not doing that. Well, I'm not really talking about 4 and 5-year-olds. I'm talking about the 10-year-old who you have to take his iPad or her iPad away because they will literally stay up till 3 in the morning watching Flow Wrestling. The little psycho kids who really, right? They might do other sports too, but they're like psycho about wrestling. Okay, so let's say they play soccer, and maybe you say, well, we're not going to play the super expensive select soccer where we travel the nation like a rock star. We're going to do regular old soccer because it's a nice break. You like soccer, but you don't want to go to soccer camp. You're not watching soccerwrestling.com at 2 in the morning. You're a wrestler. Or maybe you're a high school wrestler who falls into this category, or a middle school wrestler. So this is really for the kids who legitimately are like, just love it. They might do other things, but this is their main deal. So training once a week year round, I think, is just pretty much mandatory for several reasons. So I know in our academy, if you train once a week year round, and we get about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 10 minutes of live wrestling a week, you're going to get about 670 matches worth of live wrestling. You say, 700 matches worth of live? Yep. So sometimes I think we think, well, one day a week isn't enough. Screw it. We're just not even going to do it. We're going to take 4 to 6 months off. You don't do that. One day a week does make a difference, right? It's called the aggregation of marginal gains. You just have to keep showing up, putting the time in. During season, you're going to put more time in. Maybe if you quit football because, you're too small, you don't think you can make the team, or maybe your daughter's quitting the fall softball league. Say, okay, now I can go 2-3 times a week then because I'm down to 2 sports now. Then obviously the kids who go down to 1 sport, they're going to have more time to designate to this. But I think that when you look at the number of hours that you think it's going to take to master learn the feel of wrestling. So from a live wrestling standpoint, it takes a lot of hours of live wrestling. You say, well, how come you're not using that new move we learned? We just drilled it. Dude, it's not easy to use something in competition. So like a sport like gymnastics, the move that you drilled and practice is easy to do in competition because the competition is the same. No one's shooting on her and pulling on her wrist and snapping her in the head and pushing her. So there's some resistance. So as far as learning to use your technique in live wrestling, you have to drill it, and then you have to drill it with an opponent who's giving a little bit of resistance. We call that combative drilling. And then you have to learn to hit it in live wrestling against the easy kids, and then the really good kids, and then you got to learn to hit it against the national champions if you want to be a national champ, because there's always a resistance there. So I feel like people who don't train once a week year round, they're never going to develop the feel of wrestling that's necessary. Secondly, they're just not going to get the repetition, right? It's like bodybuilding. If you take 6 or 7 months off, you wouldn't show up November to a bodybuilding competition and expect to win. You wouldn't throw your daughter on a balance beam or do the vault, which is the most dangerous apparatus or sport there is. You're like, no, honey, you haven't done gymnastics in 8 months. We're not gonna do backflips on the high bar, okay? Let's ease back into this. But we do that in wrestling. We just jump back out there and act like, okay, where's the national title going to happen? It's not. And I think that part of it also is just like you lose the competitive edge. You have to learn to fight. and if you go 8 months a year without getting into a fight, and then you show up November and December and you're expecting to be a fighter, it's like, bro, you haven't fought in 8 months, you know? So start thinking outside the box. It's not just about moves and technique, but from a general, my perspective, I feel like there are a number of hours it takes, a number of reps that it takes to hone a skill. And then if you take time off, even if you have the skill honed, you take time off, that skill's going to diminish a little bit. Are you going to go back to zero? No, you're not ever going to go back to zero. But you know, like Serena Williams, if she loses just like 1% of her effectiveness on her backhand, it's going to cost her 10 ranking spots in the world and probably $30 million. Now, you possibly can say, I lost 10% of my feel, I lost 10% of my competitiveness, I lost 10% of my conditioning and my stance, I lost 10% of my edge, I lost 10% of my single leg and my ability to mat return on top. And it doesn't really affect you that much. And then, you know, you put another 2 months in and you're back to where you started. But, you know, on the national level, it is. And if you went to wrestling college, understand there's only 79 Division I wrestling colleges. So there's only 79 spots. If you're going to be a 57-pounder in college, there's only 79 people in all of America. Just think if there was only 79 people allowed to be a dentist, only 79 people allowed to be a carpenter, only 79 people allowed to be a wrestling coach or a math teacher. You're like, holy cow, there's like 372 million people in America. Well, that's how hard it is. So, you know, when you look at how difficult it is, when you set these goals, understand how difficult they are. And I do think that as we get older, narrowing it down to just one sport or maybe two, but not ignoring the sport of wrestling during that time off, like out of officially hardcore season. And, you know, I think once a week year round is mandatory. So how much should you train? Obviously, it depends on your age level. It depends on your goals. But I do think that when you start to say, Nick's right, you can get over 650 matches worth of live just by going once a week. At least our academy. Some people do like 10 minutes of live wrestling. It's completely stupid. Live wrestling is mandatory. It should be, you know, 65% drilling, 60% drilling, 35, 40% live, in my opinion. Not at the college level. Those guys will kill each other. They go so hard. They go like 10-minute go. They might go, you know, I remember John Smith, and when we trained together, we would always put 10 minutes, 5-minute break, 10 minutes, 5-minute break, 10 minutes, 5-minute break. You know, that was our live wrestling. And college wrestling was pretty much the same, unless it was situations and so forth. But, you know, I think, understand that, try not to take any time off and just get on the mat once a week. And you do that for 2 years to 10 years, you're going to be mesmerized. And then as you get older, maybe in 8th grade, 9th grade, you're like, okay, I'm not going to play 150 baseball games anymore. I'm going to narrow this down. I'm just going to play regular old super duper fun time baseball, or maybe just the high school baseball team, right? And you maybe quit football and you really dump more time into wrestling. I think that we have time, and I think that we think we can take time off, and it's all going to be okay. Just because it's worked for us in the past, sort of. It's like eating. If you're training for Miss Fitness or bodybuilder competition, and you have a McDonald's hamburger for lunch today, it's probably not going to cost you your whole career. You're probably not going to have a heart attack, but you got to get back on track, right? So just because you took 3 months off last year and tragedy didn't strike, and like, hey, we still placed in state. Okay, good. But there's only 79 spots. And if you really, really, really want to wrestle in college, maybe even at a Division I level, you have to understand that maybe I can squeeze in one practice a week, or maybe I just need to lower my goals. I had a mom, she was a friend of mine, they graduated years ago. She kind of got mad because I go, then maybe Ben should just lower his goals, you know? I was being like honest, and she got very offended. And I'm like, he's signing up for lacrosse. You know, he's been stressed out about wrestling. He only wants to wrestle Division One. And I'm like, dude, your team started lacrosse for some reason. First year, it's like, oh, I'm gonna go try lacrosse. I'm like, dude, he's a senior. You don't do that. You know, lower your goals. That's okay too, right? So I feel like, for, once a week, year round, can change your career. Make sure there's a lot of organized drills. Make sure you're focusing on the 95-5 rule. 95% of your points come from 5% of the wrestling. Every college wrestling match looks pretty much the same, most of them. That's by design, it's not by accident. People say college wrestling's boring because all the matches look the same. That's by design, they're supposed to, but you don't get bored by baseball. So I don't think wrestling's a boring sport. I think maybe you're just not a fan like you wish you were. Because you'd have no problem watching baseball for 9 hours on a Sunday. That game hasn't changed in 200 years. So your job as a wrestler is to look exactly like the college guys. You want to underteach, over drill. You want to focus on the common positions and the core skills, right? And I think that's going to be mandatory too. So it's not just putting in time. It's like having a system in place where you're like actually focusing on the study guide, right? So I tell our campers this is the study guide to wrestling. When you come to our 14-day camp and our 28-day camp, this is the study guide to the sport of wrestling. Master the study guide. You're going to have to take the test. Isn't it awesome when teacher says, you're going to have a test on Friday, but Monday I'm going to give you the 5-page packet with all of the questions and answers, and you just have to study that and memorize and understand it. So, make sure that you have a system in place, getting a lot of live wrestling, you have various different partners, and get on the mat once a week year round. It's going to change your career. Good luck.